To discuss this, I'm joined from Alpine, Texas by Ali Abunimah. He's the co-founder of pro-Palestinian website The Electronic Intifada. In Burke, Virginia, we have Imad Harb. He's the Director of Research and Analysis at the Arab Center in Washington, D.C. And completing our panel in London is Charlie Wolf. He's a broadcaster and political commentator. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Ali, let me begin with you. So Mohammed bin Salman's comments about Israel, is it the major breakthrough that it's made out to be?
No, because Mohammed bin Salman doesn't speak for the Palestinian people. I'm not even sure he speaks for the Saudi people. Palestinians can speak for themselves, and they haven't agreed to give up their land. And I think it's particularly noxious for people to be celebrating his comments at a time when the world is silent at Israel's premeditated massacre of civilian demonstrators in Gaza. And that's something that Human Rights Watch investigation just came out with about the premeditated targeting of civilian demonstrators and likely to happen again tomorrow. And I feel like comments like the ones from Mohammed bin Salman simply fuel the sense of Israeli impunity and entitlement and encourage the kinds of crimes we're seeing in Gaza.
Right. Ali, before I bring the others in, let me then ask you if you believe that this signals a shift, that the Saudis have, I guess, abandoned any support of the Palestinian cause.
What it represents is that the Saudi regime, as other Gulf regimes, including the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and others, have had sort of clandestine or illicit relationships with Israel for many years. What it signals is them coming out of the closet, so to speak, embracing Israel openly, on the basis that Israel, as a Jewish sectarian state, has common interests with these so-called Sunni Arab states on a sectarian basis against Iran. And from the Israeli perspective, Israel has always relied on undemocratic Arab regimes in the surrounding region to help it maintain its position and to help it maintain its occupation of the Palestinians. Right. So yes, those regimes do still pay lip service to the Palestinian cause, and some of them indeed provide humanitarian aid. But the issue is not one of humanitarian aid. The issue is one of political support to end Israel's regime of occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid, which we see in its most brutal form in Gaza, of shoot-to-kill orders against tens of thousands of unarmed Palestinians simply marching for their rights, and at the same time, Israeli propaganda trying to justify these killings by portraying these people marching for their rights as if they're terrorists.
Okay, let me bring in Charlie Wolf. Charlie, Ali made the point that it's particularly noxious to him that we're seeing this interpretation of there being a sort of Saudi-Israeli thaw at this moment in time. And anyway, if the Israelis are going to have allies in the region, why are they in an alliance with a country that pumps out arguably the most anti-Semitic stuff around the world, much more arguably than Iran does?
Well, first off, when you're speaking about premeditated, it seems if anything was premeditated, it was the leadership, the Hamas leadership, putting tens of thousands. I'm glad he used that. I can quote him now. Tens of thousands of people on a border. You know, if you're defending a border, you have a right to do whatever it takes. And again, tens of thousands, whether they're armed or unarmed, that's a lot of people, and that can be a dangerous situation. So I think Israel acted within its rights. And again, you know, if Hamas wasn't provocating like that, maybe we'd be moving along.
What was the provocation? How are people demanding their rights provoking you?
Well, let me make my statement, and then we can move on from there. You know, whether the statement by bin Salman is of importance, it's a shift or not, we don't know. I mean, the Saudis kind of take care of the Saudis, and they do play both sides of the street. I'm sure we're probably all going to agree on that. But it's better than nothing at all. I think, you know, for the sake of the Palestinians, I think I can say that I'm actually in common cause with the other two gentlemen. I mean, we'd all like to see peace, and I'd like to see a prosperous Palestinian state. But again, as long as they're being led by Hamas, they don't seem to be you know, making the right moves. I don't think Hamas is serving them well.
What about 2 million people besieged in Gaza? Do they have rights? Do 2 million
Everybody
people
has
in Gaza?
rights, obviously. But again, Israel has a right to protect itself and defend itself. And I think that
From
I'd
what?
rather
From
hear
civilian
I think
protesters?
they have a
The
right,
shoot
they have
to
a,
kill
they have a right
orders were very,
to
very
recognize
clear.
they have a right to the land that they're on to be recognized, and not to hear statements of the river to the sea.
Okay, fair enough. So we've got both perspectives on Gaza right now. If you guys would allow me, just for a second, to put a lid on it for a second, because I want to go back to the Saudi element with Imad. I want to focus on this. Imad, is this a shift, or has this always been business as usual, that the Israelis and the Saudis have had this weird sort of alliance because enemy of my enemy is my friend? They both recognize, from their perspective, an Iranian threat. Mohammed bin Salman is just articulating it to Jeffrey Goldberg.
This is definitely a shift in Saudi policy, yes. The Saudi state, as far as I'm concerned, the Saudi institutions are not necessarily there yet. In other words, the Saudi institutions reflect a long-held foreign policy of Saudi Arabia and the Arab world that says that the peace with Israel, so to speak, is going to be built upon the proper addressing of the national rights of the Palestinian people. So when Mohammed bin Salman says what he says, he's basically really shifting the Saudi position from one that depends on addressing the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to one that really gives Israel and the Israeli Zionist propaganda, so to speak, or the original idea of Zionism that God gave this land to the Jews, and now the Jews all have the right to that land. That's exactly how the Arab world, that's exactly how the Saudi Arabian institutions are interpreting what MBS said.
So, Ali, we tried to get scores of Saudis onto the show. We invited a lot of Saudis. All of them declined. They didn't want to come onto the program. So let me be the Saudi for the sake of this argument, for the sake of this next question. So we have the king, Mohammed bin Salman's father, coming out. Maybe it was damage control, coming out afterwards, reaffirming the kingdom's steadfast position towards the Palestinian issue and the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to an independent state with Jerusalem as its capital. And to add to that, the Saudis will go, oh, come on, we had the 2002 Saudi peace plan. We were driving that, the Mecca agreement in 2007, where we brought Hamas and Fatah to the table. We have been integral to trying to solve this issue, whether it's in terms of 2 states, 1 state, whatever. We want peace. How would you respond to that?
Well, I agree that the 2002 so-called Arab Peace Initiative was a far-reaching and generous offer that Israel rejected, as it has rejected every single generous offer. This peace initiative, sponsored by the Saudis, said to Israel that, look, you can have normalized relations with the entire Arab world, even the whole Muslim world, in exchange for withdrawing from just a fraction of historic Palestine, the 22% occupied in 1967, and letting Palestinians have a state there. And in the 15 years since that peace initiative, Israel has delivered its answer, which is a very hard and firm no, which has come not merely with a verbal rejection, but with rejection in fact by Israel's continued violent colonization of the West Bank, its ongoing theft of land for the construction of Jewish-only settlements on occupied territory, something the entire world considers to be illegal, and its siege of Gaza, which Israel makes very clear. The reason 2 million Palestinians are caged into the Gaza Strip, a giant ghetto, which should offend anyone with a sense of history and a sense of justice. The reason that Palestinians are caged in there is simply because they're not Jewish, and Israel defines itself as a Jewish state in which indigenous Palestinians represent a so-called demographic threat. I think the message after 15 years of Israeli further rejectionism is not to coddle Israel more and offer it more concessions, as the Saudis are doing. It is to hold it accountable. It is to impose sanctions on it so that it stops its criminal enterprise in the West Bank, ends its siege of Gaza, and begins to respect Palestinian rights.
Okay. Yes. Charlie Wolf, is there anything in that you agree with?
No. It was a very masterful turnaround reality. But no, I think he's taken every.
You can't challenge one fact
on its head. I mean, no, it really has been. You really turned everything right around on its head. You're calling them a terrorist state, yet they have an army that is controlled by a civilian, independently elected legislature and executive. They have a court system.
Those are the words of the Turkish Prime Minister. The Turkish President.
Arabs have served at every level of the Israeli state, including, I think there was a gentleman, an Arab, or I think it was Druze, who was president for a time when the current president couldn't hold his office. We've had generals who are Arabs, etc. So, it's time we kind of got back to planet reality, and then maybe there'd be a chance at peace. Once we kind of drop the hatred and what have you, you talk about this.
Do you think it's hatred to oppose military occupation?
The Jews are a tribal people. That is the children of Israel. So that's why Jews live there. But Arabs and Christians and everybody can live in Israel with no problem. Yet, you talk about these settlements that, or you talk about the lands that the Palestinians want to start their state on. That's going to be one state, or one, no Jews allowed, Juden free. So I don't know why that never gets addressed. If Jews want to stay,
do you think I have a
Palestinian state?
Can I ask you a question, Charlie? Ask you a question, Charlie?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Do you think that it's hatred and anti-Semitism to oppose military occupation, to oppose Israel's 65 laws that discriminate against Palestinians for not being Jewish? Do you think it's hatred and anti-Semitism for B'Tselem to call on Israeli soldiers to disobey illegal orders to shoot at unarmed demonstrators, as B'Tselem have done? Do you think all that just amounts to hatred and incitement?
Well, B'Tselem is a bit of a radical group, but I'll say this much: at least in Israel, you can have radical.
No, I'm asking you to give me a correct. Is Human Rights Watch also a radical anti-Israel organization?
10,000 people show up on your border. You have a right to protect yourself.
So we're back. Okay, we're back to 10,000 people on the border. Okay. I don't want to go around in circles. Okay, Charlie doesn't want to. Okay, fair enough, Charlie. Imad, we're running out of time. Imad, I want
a single point.
Okay, fair enough. Imad, I want you to wrap us up a little bit.
I'd rather look at the big picture and try and find peace between the peoples.
Okay, hold on. So Imad,
I think it's
Imad, big picture. Let's try and
occupation and land theft.
Ali is not going to answer your question.
Peace and occupation.
Ali doesn't want to answer your questions directly.
Imad.
Okay, Imad, big picture. Going back to the beginning, as we circle back to the beginning, and this will have to be the final answer because I'm out of time and I have to move on. Imad, are we seeing the fault lines being clearer now in the region? So we're seeing the Saudis, perhaps the Americans, the Israelis, the other Gulf states, and others, the Iranians, maybe the Turks, the Palestinians, finding their support there, and others, and maybe even the Russians. Is that what's happening vis-a-vis the Palestinian issue?
I honestly don't see any fault lines really being drawn here. I think that the MBS is speaking for himself as far as I'm concerned. MBS is speaking for himself. He is trying to basically curry favor with the Trump administration and the present Israeli government. I don't see the Arab world really going along with whatever Saudi Arabia is trying to do right now is regarding the Palestinian issue. Polls show that the Arab world is still solidly behind the Palestinian cause. There's still, 80-90% who are still looking for a just and legitimate solution and that addresses the legitimate concerns of the Palestinian people.
Ali Abunimah, Charlie Wolf, and Imad Harb, I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.